All right, welcome to a monster 1 hour edition of James Palmer's Insider Notebook here on Bleacher Report. We are coinciding this directly with the new league year for the 2026 season. I have said the words 4 o'clock Eastern on Wednesday. It can become blank a number of times over the last several days. Well, now things can be official. What exactly has to happen right now at this instant? Every team in the NFL needs to be cap compliant. They need to be under the NFL's salary cap. That's why we've gotten a lot of restructures over the last 24 hours with a lot of contracts. I'll get into that. What can also become official now, just a few things before we get to Maxx Crosby, is they have the ability, the Los Angeles Rams, to make the trade official for Trent McDuffie, make the new contract official simultaneously that makes him the highest paid cornerback in football. They will both happen at the exact same time with this 4 o'clock window starting. And then that changes where their cap is. The trade becomes official. The contract's official. Same thing with DJ Moore. Look for a contract structure there as well. But his trade from the Bears to the Buffalo Bills becomes official. Maxx Crosby's money now returns to the Las Vegas Raiders officially and is on their books for the 2026 salary cap right now as we speak. Things can always change, but the money had to be there and they had to be under. As well as Kyler Murray's release can become official from the Arizona Cardinals, and he can now start talking to teams. I'll get to that in a little bit. Kirk Cousins' release will be official now that we've hit 4 o'clock as well. There's been some deals in the last couple of minutes, and Nick Cross, a really, really good safety, heading to the Commanders. Kevin Byard, who I think is one of the most underrated safeties, going 1 year for $9 million to the Patriots. I think that was a really, really smart move, in all honesty. All right, so now let's go and move on to Maxx Crosby and the big deal there. Let's see what ends up happening to Okay, I'm just watching all these trades go down and everything get official. It's kind of hilarious. All right, where do things stand with Maxx Crosby? We had a about half-hour emergency stream last night when the news broke that the Baltimore Ravens were going to be backing out of this trade where they sent 2 first-round picks to the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders had been operating like Maxx Crosby's money was off the books. They were going to be able to go and make all of these moves. We'll get into all of those moves a little bit later, but this is specifically about Maxx and specifically about a physical. This is not a failed physical. Let's make sure that's clear. You don't really fail a physical in the NFL. You're just red flagged to a point to where a team doesn't feel comfortable moving forward with you as their player that they're acquiring. That's essentially what happened with Maxx Crosby. There's no such thing as a failed physical. But what happened was they looked at the knee and things weren't exactly where they thought it should be in terms of his rehab and his recovery. The part where everybody is kind of up in arms with this physical is essentially this. Everybody knew all the information about the injury. The entire league knew about the information about the injury. He barely practiced during the season. We all talked about it during the season that he was playing with a knee issue. We all know about the scans in December that he went and got from other doctors showing that he needs a meniscus repair and that he can still finish the season, but the repair is going to happen. It was well documented about the operation. That was about 8 weeks ago. Everybody knew, from his agents making it clear to all the teams that were interested in him, to the Raiders making it clear to all the teams that were interested in him, to Maxx Crosby making it clear to all the teams that were interested in him, that he wasn't going to be available until June, that he wasn't going to be really participating in any of your offseason activities, as this is a 4 to 6 month recovery. Again, we're only 8 weeks out. So he would not essentially pass a physical right now. Everybody who was dealing with the Raiders in terms of trying to acquire him knew that. That's why everybody is kind of up in arms about what happened with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is a very well-run organization all the time, so everybody has a lot of respect for the way the Ravens and Steve Bisciotti run their organization. But this is essentially an idea in terms of like risk versus value. They gave up a lot. And where that sliding scale on your comfort level with certain injuries or certain flags that come up, and all of his scans are there, that's what happens in these deals. Everything that he's been scanned on, every injury history that he has, all gets sent to the Ravens so they can go and have this physical where they look him over. Well, the amount of money that they're going to be dishing out to Maxx Crosby, the capital that they're going to be dishing out for Maxx Crosby, that slides your scale probably a little bit in terms of risk and value and in terms of risk tolerance. That's really the things that we're discussing here. Well, the Ravens didn't see enough there to where they were satisfied, and they wanted to back out of the trade. So what does this mean essentially for the Raiders? Well, essentially means that the Raiders spent a lot of money. They spent $280 million on, I believe, roughly 7 players, and they spent a ton. Would they have spent $27 million on Tyler Linderbaum if they knew Maxx Crosby's money and cap hit numbers in the 30s were going to be coming back onto their cap? Well, the good news is they were so far below the cap, they were able to get all of those deals essentially locked in, quote unquote, in terms of negotiating, because none of them can become official till now, that they still were, with Maxx Crosby's number, below the salary cap number. Really, really good that that was the case for the Raiders. If they weren't and Max's numbers were coming back, the Las Vegas Raiders would have been in a very, very difficult situation. They would have had to figure out something with some of the players that they'd agreed upon, and then them themselves would have had to do bad business, like what the Ravens are being accused of by a lot of people if you talk to them around the NFL, that this was kind of dirty, shady business by the Ravens because there was so much information about Maxx Crosby's knee out there that backing out at the hour in which they did would have had a ripple effect across the Raiders organization if they weren't under that number with bringing Max's numbers back in. But they are, so that eases things from the Raiders just a little bit. So he's back now on the roster, back now in the building this morning, going through his rehab. I tweeted out a few hours ago, I just wanted to say this. Heaven help the guy who has to be the tackle lining up against Maxx Crosby in week 1. This is going to be a madman absolutely possessed no matter what uniform he's in. A lot of people believe it might be a Raiders organization. It might Raiders uniform. This is a different organization than the one that he left. They went out and made a lot of moves. They took advantage of a weak off-ball linebacker market and got 2 of them. They got an outstanding center. They took a risk on an edge rusher. I mean, they did some things that makes this team definitely better. But they're not in the same position they thought they were going to be in. There's a quote right up there. That's Maxx Crosby's agent, actually, that has put that out there. CJ LeBoy, he puts it out in terms of where Maxx stands. And they've been very transparent, to my understanding, throughout this entire process. But with this trade, the Raiders thought that they were going to have the 14th overall pick to pair with the number 1 overall pick, another first rounder the next year. They were starting to change their thinking about where they were going to be. And the other part for the Raiders is this. They wanted it to be as clean as possible. Maxx did. Mark Davis, their owner, did. I think John Spytek, from everything that he did, also wanted this to be as clean as possible, and it just has been anything but. I believe in an hour or so, Eric DeCosta, the general manager for the Ravens, will be addressing the media, so we'll get an opportunity to hear from him about where he stands. What this means for the Ravens, they did really want Maxx Crosby. And I know a lot of people are saying this could be cold feet. I got plenty of texts from people around the NFL that this could be, the Ravens backing out, seeing that Trey Hendrickson was available, and they wouldn't have to give up 2 ones. Let's just fail Maxx Crosby on the physical. That thinking is certainly around the NFL. But you have to remember that you don't just make this trade willy-nilly. You don't just go, oh yeah, we'll give you 2 first-round picks. They thought about it enough to understand that Maxx Crosby was worth the 2 first-round picks. Now, they were the only team willing to give 2 first-round picks, but they needed pass rush in the worst possible way. I think they only had 30 sacks this past year. They know the production that he has. They know they're right there on the doorstep of being a Super Bowl champion, and these type of players push you over the hump. With a 2-time MVP at quarterback, you have a lot of contracts in place already on that defensive side of the ball. They were in a really great spot to welcome in Maxx Crosby. But they don't go through with the trade, and they pivot to Trey Hendrickson. And I'll get to Trey Hendrickson in just a moment, but I want to get to, before we move on, what this means for the rest of the NFL. The rest of the NFL did move on when Maxx Crosby's deal on Friday was essentially done. So teams I talked to, one, I tweeted it out, essentially told me, I said, are you guys still in on Maxx Crosby? And I essentially was told, we don't know what to think right now. We've moved on. Everybody's moved on. WTF. Teams were upset. Teams shifted. The Cowboys specifically shifted. They made the deal for Rashawn Gary. Then they were no longer in on Maxx Crosby. Could other teams now around the league be interested in Maxx at a lower price? Because obviously the leverage that John Spytek has decreased. I don't see him kind of going out there and shopping Maxx Crosby for a discount rate now. I just really don't see that happening. Now, again, there's stuff to be worked out because obviously some of this stuff was personal between Maxx Crosby and specific individuals in that building. But I don't see them going out there and just, dropping him off for a discount rate. Are teams like, say Howie Roseman, who was kind of in the weeds a little bit on Maxx Crosby with the Eagles, going to try to take advantage of this? Certainly, those type of general managers should be going out there trying to take advantage of it, because if he's flagged in one building doesn't mean he's exactly flagged in another. Everybody go back and look up Drew Brees and what went on with Drew Brees and his right throwing shoulder, and it ended up being just one of the best moves the Saints have ever made in the history of their franchise, because he obviously doesn't pass a certain physical in another building. He is deemed okay from the Saints, and he goes on to have an unbelievable career. This doesn't mean Maxx Crosby can't play. This doesn't mean that there's going to be major concerns down the road. Even those could be alleviated with this recovery and how he maintains himself through the rest of his career. But essentially, what's going on is the entire league knew this was a full repair. It was going to take a while, and now they all had to force to pivot after the Ravens made a move and then went away from it. There were a number of teams that were interested in Maxx. I don't know if they're all there still. A lot of them pivoted and moved their money elsewhere, whether it was at edge rushers or whether it was other aspects of what they were looking at in terms of making their team better in terms of free agency. So a lot of teams pivoted. There's a very good chance Maxx Crosby is back on the Las Vegas Raiders in 2026. It certainly could happen. And maybe you have a different Maxx Crosby. I've heard that he's been absolutely just livid, rightfully so. And he is now attacking his rehab to get back on the field. And we'll see what ends up happening with his future, because right now it's kind of, I don't want to say up in the air, but more likely that he plays for the Raiders right now than anyone else next season. Okay, let's get to Trey Hendrickson and how that kind of connects to the Maxx Crosby situation. Now, what we thought on Monday when I had the mega stream, as I call it, the hour-and-a-half stream, right when the tampering window was opening, we all believed that Trey Hendrickson was going to be one of the first guys to go. He was a free agent for the first time. He's 31 years old. Yes, he did have an injury and a core muscle injury. We'll get to that in a moment. That cut his season short this past year. But the two previous seasons, he had 17 and a half sacks in each one of those, and he's one of the best pass rushers in football. I think what we saw early on is he knew the pass rush numbers were going to be big. Jalen Phillips had the biggest deal of anybody during free agency, with 4 years and $120 million going to the Carolina Panthers, who snaked him from the Philadelphia Eagles. So he thought his market was going to be in that range as well, as he just played this last year at about $29-30 million, right in that range. He thought he was going to be above 30. Well, he kind of miscalculated his market a little bit. Teams weren't really looking at Trey Hendrickson at that price. And so when the first day came and went, we started seeing that teams were more interested in Trey Hendrickson, in all honesty, at about $25 million or lower, closer to $20 million to my understanding. So between that 20 and 25 was more of where the numbers started to feel when Tuesday rolled around. And so Maxx Crosby, his deal ends up kind of falling through, and we'll get to the connection of Trey Hendrickson in about 30 seconds, because what ended up happening was the biggest part of this. Trey Hendrickson remained patient. He dug his heels in, essentially felt like he was still worth a good amount of money. He didn't jump at any of these lower rates. He ended up just kind of sticking with what he thought his value was. On Tuesday, the deal ends up falling through for the trade for Maxx Crosby. And this is where the brilliant reporting by my really good buddy, Mike Garafolo and NFL Network comes through. He mentioned a mystery team. And the mystery team, when all the teams were talking about Trey Hendrickson, and there were several teams that were in on him, whether it was Philadelphia, whether it was Indianapolis, there was definitely a number of teams that were interested. They started hearing about another team yesterday afternoon that was now in play. Well, if you put the pieces together, that mystery team was the Ravens putting themselves back in play, because without Maxx Crosby, they certainly needed a pass rusher to come in and help them out. So if you really look into it, all the teams didn't know who this mystery team, which was the Ravens, was coming back into the fold in the Trey Hendrickson sweepstakes. The only other people that really knew outside of the Ravens that this trade on Tuesday afternoon was not going to go through was Trey Hendrickson and his representation, because they were contacted by the Ravens. So now when you think about it, when nobody knew anything, and we were doing the breaking news on Tuesday night after it came out that the Raiders posted that the Ravens had backed out of this deal, that entire day yesterday, Trey Hendrickson and Trey Hendrick's representation knew that that trade wasn't going to go through. And what makes the ability for the Ravens to go and get Trey Hendrickson is they already had the numbers for Maxx Crosby allocated for how they were going to work their cap. They have already slotted in everything that Maxx was going to make, which was like roughly $30 million over the next several years. And so that number was already accounted for with the way the Ravens were doing their business financially. So they could swoop in, be the mystery team and outbid all these other teams that were looking at Trey Hendrickson in the low 20s to mid 20s. That changed it dramatically for Trey Hendrickson. He gets the 4-year, $112 million contract that has a chance to go up to $120 million. And just by being patient and digging his heels in and seeing that his market went down, but not really accepting it, allowed Trey Hendrickson to go to the Baltimore Ravens and fill that spot. Now, everybody will kind of attach this to them pivoting, seeing Trey Hendrickson still available, and realizing that they could get out of this contract and not give up 2 first-round picks and get another really, really good pass rusher. Obviously, that perception is going to be there. That's always going to be there. Whether that's entirely true, that's up for debate. And to compare these two players, I just wanted to mention this. They're both outstanding. Since 2019, which was Maxx Crosby's rookie year, the sacks go as followed. Max, then Trey. 69.5 to 74.5. Tackles for loss. Max, 133 to Trey Hendrickson with 72. The 133 is the most in the NFL since then. QB hits 164 to 154, very comparable. Forced fumbles 11 to 14, very comparable. But the tackles, this is where Mad Max is just an absolute animal. The tackles for loss are insane. The total tackles in the same amount of time, both of them edge rushers. Maxx Crosby has 278 total solo tackles during that time. Trey Hendrickson has 148. If that just shows you the dynamic player that Maxx Crosby is and why he was worth the 2 first-round picks and why everybody was kind of going after him, even though Trey Hendrickson was there, those things kind of show you exactly why. All right, I could get into this chat a little bit. Let's see what else is happening before we get to Broncos adding some help for Knicks. They've definitely been in on some. I don't think they're done looking, if that suffices what you're saying. Please tell me the Broncos going to get another pass catcher. Again, I don't think they're done looking by any stretch. I do think they went out and they took care of their own, which is something that George Payton and Sean Payton like to do quite a bit. But I don't think they're done looking around, and there might be some other options that are still available. Yeah, but Breeze can barely use that arm now. Actually, it actually is, he kind of can't. I took a video that went completely viral when I was covering the playoff game between the Bucks and the Saints at the Superdome, COVID times, and there was nobody there, and Tom Brady comes over to play catch with Drew Brees' kids, and we all knew it was Drew's last game. Drew was essentially throwing left-handed to his kids out there because, yeah, that arm is just not really working, but that arm also got him to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer right now. Let's see what else we got here. If the Ravens were about to commit all that for Crosby, no surprise they signed Hendrickson for that much. That's exactly right. They had the money allocated for Max, so they could very easily swoop in and outbid the other teams that thought Trey Hendrickson's market was in a very specific spot, low to mid 20s. They could swoop in and give him more, and nobody really saw them coming. In all honesty, that's the way this really kind of worked out. Whole cap space, and we do nothing. I don't know who that is. Do we think Dallas is really out on Crosby? Have you heard if there's any interest in linebackers? I've heard that there's not interest back in Maxx Crosby. Could that change? Certainly. Price versus value could certainly change. I do know that their team doctor, I believe, was one of the doctors that the Ravens actually discussed some things with. He's a knee specialist, actually. That the Cowboys doctor is the one that Patrick Mahomes went and had his knee surgery with because he's an expert, I think, on MCLs, which is one of the things that Patrick had. But he was one of the doctors that was in on this, so the Cowboys have a lot of information for sure. I don't know if they're really in. I've been told they're not. Could that change? We'll see. Could the Lions get Crosby? A lot of people are going to be asking if the price has gone down. I don't think the Raiders have taken that price down. I'm not sure the Lions are in on that with paying 2 edge rushers about what that price would be. Any word on Chicago looking into Crosby? They certainly were there in the initial group. I don't think they were fully in there to the level of the Cowboys and the Ravens because I think Ryan Poles was being a little level-headed and measured with how he was going about this. Giants getting O-line help. The O-line isn't awful, but I do think they're still looking. There's not a lot of O-line help out there right now in free agency that doesn't really come. You can bargain shop for sure right now. Chargers for Reek or Debo. They were kind of in to some extent at some of these pass catchers, the Chargers. But then I started hearing that they were, and you saw this in the way that they moved, changing a little bit of what they wanted to do. And they really allocated it towards, protecting Justin Herbert, trying to get, edge help. They get the Khalil Mack situation handled. They find, different ways that they're going to operate as an offense. And they kind of look like they kind of shifted away from pass catchers a little bit. I wouldn't rule them out entirely, but they did shift a little bit. Commanders getting any pass rushers? They've been in on a lot of these guys. They've just been outbid or they haven't been picked, in all honesty. But there's still a couple of guys that are available. I know they're still looking around for sure. Bills for Max. Bills were in. Yeah, they definitely were in, but we'll see. Just announced Kyler to the Vikings already. We'll get to Kyler and why this might take a moment, but we'll see exactly. I'll break that down in a little bit. But let's get to Daniel Jones, a different quarterback first, and kind of tell you what transpired with him, because I think he's directly tied to what we were just talking about, and this is why this is fascinating. When Alec Pierce got his deal done and got the biggest free agent contract in the history of the NFL for a wide receiver, we all should have saw it coming, and I kind of think I said it on one of these streams. It was actually done for a few days prior than when it was actually announced, but he was never going to return to the Colts if Daniel Jones wasn't going to be the quarterback. They have a great relationship. He wanted the quarterback spot solidified for wherever he was going to go and play. And so we should have read into that going, all right, Alec Pierce deal is done. The Daniel Jones deal is going to get done. He's going to be back in Indianapolis. But what we were waiting for is what the deal was going to be for. And let me put you into what we talked about a few weeks ago and how that ties into this contract now, which was 2 years, essentially $88 million, the biggest two-year deal that's happened in the NFL. They gave him the transition tag instead of the franchise tag for a very specific reason. They know they had less security, right? Some team could go match your transition tag, and then if you don't match it, you don't get any compensation. But they were willing to take that risk because they knew Daniel Jones wanted to come back to the Colts. And the reason they took that risk as well is it lowered kind of the numbers in terms of negotiating. When you look at the way the two tags differ, it dropped it. The tags are usually used when you do different contracts in terms of multi-year. What happens is you take two tags, what it would take to tag the player twice, divide it by two, split it, and you get usually what the ABY should be. Well, there's about a $10 million difference. If you looked at it in the transition tag, Chris Ballard's essentially trying to negotiate at about $41 million. If you look at the franchise tag, then the negotiation should start at about $49 million. So the Colts are trying to use a different tag to try to lower some of the negotiating that was going on with Daniel Jones. He essentially gets $50 million, like I mentioned. He was trying to get up towards 50. They were trying to keep it down towards 40 in 2026, which is a huge payday for him. But the length of the contract definitely benefits the Colts. And if this isn't, the sample size isn't huge, but they definitely saw some really, really good football out of Daniel Jones. And now he's coming off the Achilles. They're protected with it being essentially a 2-year deal. He has a chance to earn $6 million more in incentives. The base pay is $38 million in 2027. So you get how the number kind of dropped with it being tied to that transition tag as opposed to the franchise tag. The max value could be over $100 million over 2 years if everything is hit. Everything is hit by Daniel Jones, so he has a chance to really earn himself some more money. The reason this ties directly in to Trey Hendrickson is this. They were in on Trey Hendrickson. They wanted to bring in Trey. They wanted to have him reunite with Lou Anarumo, their defensive coordinator, who had him in Cincinnati and knows exactly how to use him. And the Colts desperately need some pass rush help for sure. They couldn't really get going with Trey Hendrickson, to my understanding, until the Daniel Jones deal was done. Why? Because then they would lose some of their leverage. They do a deal with Maxx Crosby, they do a deal with Trey Hendrickson. Now the numbers change, and now Daniel Jones has the leverage in a sense. They needed to get their finances in order with their two biggest priorities, which were Alec Pierce and Daniel Jones. Once they got those lined up in terms of getting them done and where they wanted to be cap-wise, then they could have tried to close a deal with Trey Hendrickson. They ran out of time because the Ravens swooped in and ended up doing that deal. But it is funny how all these contracts are essentially connected to one another. All right, what else do we have here? 49ers news. I think they're still looking around a little bit on the Kirk Cousins officially released. Just got the text on that. Kirk Cousins has now been released with a post-June 1 designation. That's exactly what we thought was going to happen. So that's where it's at right now. We got a lot of any Bills news. We're going to get to that. 49ers news. I think they really made a big move with the Mike Evans play. I think it's a really, really good move for Kyle Shanahan. It gets him back to having a big, dominant X wide receiver like he had with Julio Jones, like when he was on Gary Kubiak's staff in Houston and they had Andre Johnson. This offense really does know how to use that player. They were looking at some other guys. I know, I think Romeo Dobbs was certainly in the mix there and some other players where they were interested at the wide receiver spot. They're also looking on the defensive line. I would keep an eye on them trying to add somebody to go opposite of Nick Bosa as they still look around, and maybe it's one of those veteran, cheaper options of these guys towards the back end of their career, but we'll see. Niners and Ayuk news or anything about someone on defense. Yep, Ayuk's going to be released. I don't know if it's been officially announced by the 49ers just yet. I don't think I've seen it. I'm still trying to keep an eye on what's going on right now. But the trades are becoming official. The Kyler Murray release. We'll see what ends up happening. I could see now that Kirk Cousins is released going somewhere where he has an opportunity to play in the beginning of the season and perhaps keep a rookie kind of away. We'll see if that could be a place like, I don't know, Vegas. If you want to know anything about the way that Clint Kubiak thinks, it's a lot like his father's, where you don't play quarterbacks right away, right out of the draft, if they're not ready. I know a lot of Raider fans would be upset if Fernando Mendoza doesn't start week one. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't. We'll see what ends up happening, but I wouldn't be shocked if they go get a veteran like, say, Kirk Cousins or somebody like that to be in that room as well and maybe start the season. We'll see how the offseason goes, but we'll see what ends up happening. The Bills are making their move at the pass rusher position. Let me just confirm this because I knew there was something that they were going after. They were in on kind of some of these other big name tickets. And let me just make sure my text. Yep, Bradley Chubb is going to go to the Buffalo Bills. I think there are some other people out there. My friend Diana Rossini, I do a show with, has it. He is going to the Buffalo Bills. We knew that they were going to look at edge rush help. We knew the Bills desperately needed edge help. We knew after the DJ Moore deal that it was going to shift their finances a little bit. Bradley Chubb is a really, really good player. That's a former top 5 pick right there. That when he stays healthy, is an outstanding pass rusher and still actually pretty good against the run as well. He just has to stay healthy. That's the part that you have to understand. And listen, they know him plenty with being from the division as well. So if you look at the numbers there, Bradley Chubb reached an agreement, 3 years, $43.5 million, worth up to $52.5 million, $29 million guaranteed. Good old Eric Burkhardt did that deal. Yep, he's been Bradley Chubb's agent his whole career. This is. I think the Bills are going after a couple of different things that they needed. Remember, they run a very different system than they did the year before on defense, so there were going to be some changes specifically at that edge rush spot in terms of the talent and the skill level and the traits that the edge rushers have in Jim Leonard's system compared to what they were running there with Sean McDermott. So Bradley Chubb, a big landing spot now. We all knew he was going to get released. It just needed to happen. And now the Buffalo Bills swoop in and snag him. Any O-line help for the Ravens? Certainly, obviously, missing out on Tyler Linderbaum and losing him is a big deal. Everybody does have to remember, the draft is a big part of this as well in terms of T-building. You're going to have to go out there and try to build through the draft in another instance as well, because some of these centers went off the board early. I think the Bills were quick with Connor McGovern, which I thought was a really, really smart play. Bucks news, I know they've been in on pass rushers a little bit. I love what the Bucks have done, honestly. I don't mind them pivoting from Mike Evans. Anything going on with the Pats? I think New England is still looking at A.J. Brown. I think they're waiting. I think they're seeing. I don't think the Romeo Dobbs signing, which I really, really liked, impedes them from doing something at some point between now and the start of the season with A.J. Brown. I really don't. Let's get to some of these restructures right now, because I know these are kind of interesting, and I know everybody's kind of curious what that means. Well, a restructure. What's happening with? Oh, sorry, I just got in my ear. That I got to get to Kyler first before we get to these restructures. Good call. Kyler Murray is officially going to be officially released now that it's a new league year. And where does Kyler Murray go? Everybody still is circling the Minnesota Vikings, and everybody here in the chat as well is even saying like, hey, why don't you just announce Kyler Murray to the Minnesota Vikings right now? Well, this could take a moment. He could sign immediately if he'd like, But there's been some buzz around the league that he is maybe going to take a moment to make sure that, he talks to some other teams. He's never done that, really. He was a number one overall pick in 2019. He didn't discuss things with a lot of teams. Everybody knew he was going to be the number one overall pick unless he was going to go play baseball for the A's. And so he hasn't had these interactions with other teams. Now, as a free agent, for the first time in his career, he can go meet with some other teams. He can meet with other possible suitors that could try to lure him in about what they'd like to do with him at the quarterback position. And at the same time, he could take a meeting with a team that could be looking for a quarterback in 2027. That would behoove him as well, wouldn't it? Like to go repair himself for a year, say it is even in Minnesota, that Kyler goes and talks to some other teams, and they really liked that the interactions that they had. And he has a different market in 2027, which is what he's trying to do, which is change the perception of what he's doing. The reason we are all connecting the Vikings to Kyler Murray are for a few reasons. One, there was some light talk about Geno Smith possibly being a landing spot there in Minnesota, but we saw that he ends up getting traded to the Jets. There was always the thought, though, with Geno Smith that it was going to be kind of a sham competition and that maybe he could even start or do something for a moment, but you can bench him pretty quickly and you're still going to J.J. McCarthy. They want a real competition for J.J. McCarthy, and Kyler Murray would essentially give you just that. He has unbelievable playmaking ability. I think he has a career completion percentage of like 67%. He's unbelievably accurate. Is some of that scrambling ability at his age kind of gone down a little bit? Some people in the league think so. I don't know if that's entirely true, but these are all the things that make Kyler Murray a very intriguing player. They wanted a competition with J.J. McCarthy, and they wanted another reclamation project, and they feel like they're very, very good at this, and Kevin O'Connell is very good at this. And if you do bring in Kyler Murray, look for the contract to be on that league minimum because the Arizona Cardinals are paying the entire thing, and the entire freight of is about $40 million, just a shade under that. But I would assume the contract wouldn't have a no franchise tag clause in it, so they can't tag him the next year. If he goes out and balls and plays great, he would want another contract after 2026. I would think that would be part of the agreement as well. But if he does beat out J.J. McCarthy and he ends up playing, say, the entire season for Kevin O'Connell, they make the postseason, it ends up being a great year, I'm curious what J.J. McCarthy's market would be. I don't think they're going to look to move him because I don't think it would be worth them moving off of a top 10 pick. For next to nothing, which some teams would probably be offering. So a lot to play with Kyler Murray and a lot to play with him over the next several days. Again, this could take a moment. This could go very quickly. He is available now. He hasn't been able to legally talk to anybody up until 31 minutes ago. So we'll see where he essentially goes. This is an interesting fit, I would say that. I know they want a reclamation project. He's never played in an offense like this before. So that is at play as well. He's never played in this hard timing offense in the way that Kevin O'Connell does it. I think it does make it a very level playing ground. I don't know if it's a perfect fit, but again, I mentioned all the things that he brings to the table, and he hasn't exactly had a setup like this while he's been in Arizona, which could even show that he's even better in a different situation. Let's get to the chat a little bit here. There's any Bills news for receivers? Okay, let me just say this. That's on there like 9 times by KC Snipes. They just made a deal for DJ Moore. That's a big move at the receiver position. Could they add another receiver in terms of like a speed guy that's cheaper to go down the field? Certainly. I'm not sure what this has been asked like a lot on receiver news. I don't. You got DJ Moore, you got Khalil Shakir, you still have Keon Coleman on the roster. You have 2 tight ends you got to throw the football to. You have a running back who loves to catch the football out of the backfield. There's only one ball. I think you do need a guy that can spread the field and go downfield. I could see them doing that and not spending a lot on that player. You just got a $30 million a year receiver. That's essentially where it's at. I hope we either get Mekhi Lemon or Jordan Tyson. I don't know which. Oh, Ravens. Yeah. The other part is, guys, when you're talking about these receivers, this is a loaded receiver class. Not a lot of ones, not a lot of X receivers, but man, there's a variety of flavors for guys that you can have throughout. A 6 might go in the first round, I'm told. There's going to be a bunch in the second and third round. So there's receivers to be had. There's another way to build your team than just free agency right now. Commanders updates. I keep seeing that here over and over again. Yes, they are looking and they were in on a running mate to go opposite of Terry McLaurin. Look for that to still be in play for what Washington's trying to do. I like what they just did in their secondary. You got a really dynamic tight end just now from the Titans, and so there's definitely some moves being made in Washington for sure. Let's get to where we're at in terms of these contract restructures. We'll get back to this. I kind of skipped over it where it's at. I kind of went out of order. My bad. Okay. This is exactly why these contract restructures happen. You saw Josh Allen get a lot of his money converted, and now they just signed Bradley Chubb. You have to move this money around, and oftentimes it's with your biggest contracts. The biggest contracts, specifically at the quarterback position, oftentimes allow you to move money. They're also a giant number on the books. Dak Prescott, $60 million a year is a huge number on the books. But also because it's so big, they have the ability to move money within it. It's why Patrick Mahomes' 10-year contract is really just so rare, because they can move so much of what's within his contract around. And when they move it, it just becomes a signing bonus, and you just can make a conversion, and then the cap number drops. The guys are still getting the money. The team is still on the hook for money, but the money's just been pushed down the road, whether it's with void years or whether it's something different. Josh Allen did a restructure today where he got essentially $12 million in terms of opening that money up for the Bills to operate this year. He's going to do it again. I was looking at what his cap numbers are over the next couple of years, and this is why you keep pushing the money sometimes down the road. A lot of teams don't like to do it. I would say the vast majority of teams, though, do it. It's just part of business. And why can you do it? Because the cap just keeps going up each and every year. The cap inclines and keeps going up to where if you push money down the road, it's going to be a smaller percentage of the total, because the total is larger. So the cap hits for Josh Allen right now is $44.2 million in 2026. It jumps to $56.1 in 27, then to $62.3, then to $89 million, and then $82 million in 2029 and 2030. That shows you that, yes, there will probably be another deal or there'll be a restructure. These things will continue to get moved around. And I had in my notes right here, they're still looking at edge rushers. Make sure you talk Chubb. Well, it already happened. But that's essentially why you move some of that money around, so you can make sure you can get some guys at premium positions where you sometimes got to pay more. With Justin Jefferson, he ended up restructuring as well. Aaron Jones ended up restructuring as well. The Vikings created some space. So people were saying there's creating space to get Kyler Murray. You're going to pay $1 million to Kyler Murray, so that's not exactly what's happening. But Justin Jefferson actually converted quite a bit. And, $23 million goes into a signing bonus this year, which is no longer part of the base salary, which is no longer part of the cap equation. So a lot of different restructures happening around the league so teams can acquire other players, get themselves cap compliant, because there were several teams that were actually even over the top of the cap number, essentially where they're at. Here's a little news for all you Bears fans who thought they were sitting on their hands, which I don't really think they were. But the Bears are signing Jedrick Willis, the former offensive tackle for the Browns. That's a little bit of help. Remember, they have a need at left tackle, certainly. They have obviously an injury there. They fixed their center spot after Drew Delman retired with a trade for Garrett Bradbury, but there's a move for the Bears. I think they've actually done some more moves than people actually give them credit for. I don't hate the way the Bears have honestly approached this entire offseason. So we're going to get to some of the news here that's going on with some of these teams, as some of the deals that are going on right now with some of the transactions that are happening in the early portion of this 2026 new league year, which is now 37 minutes old. Seahawks news. Well, we'll get to them. We'll do them and the Chiefs. How about that? Yeah, I think Nick and Chig are really good pickups for the Commanders. I think Nick Ross, underrated center for sure. I mean, safety for sure. Let's go with Chiefs news first. The Kenneth Walker signing in free agency, I think, allows them to do a lot. Not just offensively because of the way teams play them with that too deep shell, and they're always thinking about they're going deep, and now you can take advantage of making teams be more honest with an explosive running back like Kenneth Walker. No, it makes them better in the draft at number 9. I think it does two things. I think the Kenneth Walker signing by the Kansas City Chiefs, who are sitting there at 9, tells us something very specific. The Chiefs did not think Jeremiah Love's going to be there at 9. I don't think the Saints think he's going to be there at 8. I think this is a tell when you see some of these free agent signings at the running back spot that this guy's going to go right near the top of the draft. A lot of people consider him one of the 3 best players in the draft. And so the Chiefs didn't think he'd go to them at 9. So they pivot. And now, because they lock up Kenneth Walker in this signing, what can they do at 9? Anything they want. I think that really helps Brett Veach as he's trying to change things there in Kansas City. And the Trent McDuffie trade is now official, so they get that other first-round pick within this draft. So now at 9, you could go and get maybe your Travis Kelce replacement. In Sadiq, you could now have the ability to get Carnell Tate possibly if he slips to 9 and he's with Patrick Mahomes for the next decade. You have an opportunity now at 9 to move a lot of different ways. And I think because you locked in the running back and realized Love wasn't going to be there at 9, a really, really smart move by Brett Veach the way this worked. And Travis Kelce, oh, by the way, is back as well. They've made some interesting signings on the defensive side of the ball, too, I think, helping them out. But the secondary is where they're going to have to really rely on their coaching like they always have. And then the other one I wanted to touch on was what? It was the Seahawks. Seahawks are in that situation where you win a Super Bowl and everybody's going to want your players. It's kind of the way Kobe Bryant left and goes to the Bears. They bring back Shaheed, which they did think was a very valuable player, not just for what he does in the return game, what he does to be an explosive threat downfield, which is rare, but he opens so much up for Jackson Smith and Jigba. And I think that's a really, really big part. I think the Boye Mafe leaving, I don't think that surprised them at all. He was going to get starter money when he wasn't getting fully starter reps. We knew that Reek Woolen was going to depart for sure. That was a known move that we predicted. Everything that has happened really hasn't shocked us, honestly, in Seattle. And we knew Kenneth Walker wasn't going to come back, just if you read between the lines of what John Schneider was talking about. Oh, and they just got Mechie. Is that Mechie of the Panthers? The Panthers have been a very intriguing team this offseason, haven't they? You just love what they've done on the defensive side of the ball. John Mechie has had a very interesting start to his career. Obviously battles, I think, leukemia right when he's in Houston. That sets him back some time, and then he ends up going, I believe, to the Jets. There were some times I had conversations with CJ Stroud where he was like, this dude can really play, man. It's just he's been dealt kind of a rough go of it so far. Bosa brothers back in San Francisco. I think a lot of people would like that, wouldn't they? Let's get to this Cowboys news. We'll get into this right now because this is pretty cool. I like what the Cowboys have done. And what they've done is they've also leaned on their new defensive coordinator. I'll get to that in a sentence. But essentially, they've really wanted to fix the entire defensive side of the ball because the offense, it could be one of the best offenses, if not the best offense in football there in Dallas. People are saying, why didn't they swing big? Jerry says he's all in. First, they were all in on Maxx Crosby, okay? They really were. They were the runner-up in it. They just couldn't give 2 firsts. And now you look at what happened with the Ravens. They did bring back George Pickens, and he didn't walk, and he's there on the franchise tag. They did bring back Javonte Williams, who they snaked in free agency a year ago after he was released in Denver and just saw something that nobody else did, that he was going to be a very good back for them. So they did make their offense really complete to where they were at their best last year. And then when you look at them being aggressive to Max, obviously they had to pivot. And the Rashawn Gary trade for a 4th-round pick might sound like a little much, but if you ask around the league, there's still some people that think Gary might be better than some of the pass rushing options that were out there. And you're controlling Rashawn Gary at like $18, $21 million over the next couple of years. That's a discount to where some of these numbers went with guys that maybe are equal to him. But when I said lean on Christian Parker, that's a specific move right there. Christian Parker was a quality control coach on the defensive side of the ball with Green Bay in Rashawn Gary's first 2 seasons. He knows him well. Gary knows the scheme extremely well. That relationship played a part, I'm told. The scheme fit played a big part, I'm told. And then they take it a step further. They go and get PJ Locke, who was a really good special teamer and a good rotational safety, and played a lot of snaps when Talanoa Hufanga was out in Denver. And guess who was with him at the start of his career? Christian Parker was in Denver at that time, working with Vic Fangio and running the secondary. What they are leaning, and I know there were some weird comments in here about what was going on with leaning into Christian Parker. He's an outstanding evaluator. That's why some of these guys get their jobs. John Spytek told me he wanted Clint Kubiak because he's a great evaluator. The Dolphins wanted John Eric Sullivan and Jeff Hafley because they're great evaluators. You want to build your roster the right way. through evaluating players. And that's a big thing that Christian Parker did in Philadelphia. He was listened to. He was the one who really wanted Quinyon Mitchell and really wanted Cooper DeJean. Howie Roseman and company, the draft has to fall a certain way, but also listen to his input. And those are two of the best guys in football in the Eagles secondary right now. So you can see the impression that he's making in the Dallas Cowboys building already with the way that they are kind of leaning on him with some of these moves that they're letting him kind of be a part of. And so I think they've actually been somewhat aggressive. Obviously, on the Maxx Crosby one is a great specific aspect of it, but they're still looking to get better on that defensive side of the ball. And I think this defense is going to look very, very different after the draft in April. I think that draft is going to be extremely defensive heavy, to my understanding. And let's just wait a minute on how this defense looks for Christian Parker and Brian Schottenheimer in Dallas, because I think they've done some things that are pretty good. What about the Bears? Could we possibly get Max? I just don't see them lowering the price, and I don't see Ryan Poles giving up 2 ones, right? I don't see them really lowering the price. We'll see if anything happens there, but we'll have the Steelers. I like the Michael Pittman trade. I really do. I think if Aaron Rodgers comes back, which a lot of people do believe he will, I think he's a really good fit for Aaron, honestly. He's a professional receiver. He does everything right. He has a great understanding of defenses. He has a great understanding of space. He has a great understanding of what his role is within the offense. This is a guy who's caught a lot of balls from a lot of different players in Indianapolis over the years. I think he's a really good fit for what Aaron likes to do. I think that was a sneaky move that actually really benefited them quite a bit. Let's get to the Raiders here. Man, we only have like 15 minutes left in this show. Come on now. I don't like that. What else do we have? We had Steelers in here. We said Murray going to the Vikings again. Anybody looking to get Bosa? I think Bosa's not in that same realm that he used to be. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. Actually, some people in Buffalo I talked to thought he had a pretty good year this past year, but scheme fit kind of changes just a little bit in fourth there. Good move by Justin Jefferson to restructure and Lamar. Lamar had to. I mean, I think his cap number is in like the 70s. AJ Brown at 2027 first for Crosby. Howie was kind of kicking around. He wasn't fully in, I would say, like some of the other teams. But he was definitely kind of in on Maxx Crosby. All right, let's get to the Raiders here because we are talking Max a little bit. The good thing is, and we mentioned at the top of the show, with all the moves that they made and the money that they gave Tyler Linderbaum, they're able to really sign all of these players. They weren't in a position because of the cap and Max's numbers coming back on the books that they had to not get any of these players. I think the Tyler Linderbaum move stands out to me as one of the best moves that happened in free agency. And I was just going through this conversation that I had on Bleacher Report with John Spytek. You can go to the Raiders page and listen to him talk about building things the right way and building the roster the right way and understanding that there's certain moves they're going to have to make and be aggressive towards if they want to make sure that they make the rest of the core of the team better. I think Tyler Linderbaum's essentially that. They overpaid at center, but it's a force multiplier type of contract. Yes, it's $27 million, but compare it to guards. Like, it's not a crazy contract compared to some of the better guards in football. And this is a center which is going to run the show for Clint Kubiak's offense, which is really a necessity to how he runs this. He's a great run blocker. Who did you take at the top of the draft last year, John Spytek? Ashton Genty. He makes your star running back from a year ago exponentially better right away. So it's not like you just got a center. You got a guy who makes your top pick from last year better. He's going to make your number 1 overall pick, what we all assume is Fernando Mendoza, better in year 2. He's extremely smart. He can read everything for you. That's the way Kubiak's system works. The center reads everything up front for the quarterback and a lot of the coverages and the protection specifically in the run game. He can get out in space and he can move really well. He's a perfect fit. I think they also, I believe Jalen Naylor is a guy that I heard around the league as a sneaky good signing. Everybody was fascinated with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Naylor being down there on the in terms of the progressions as that third receiver. When he gets an opportunity to maybe not be in that third receiver spot, he has a chance to be a pretty good receiver. And he has an outstanding receiver coach he's been with for a number of years in Minnesota, and Keenan McCardell. So that was a sign that I think some people around the league actually really, really like, because he is a guy that people think has a pretty good upside. And then they took advantage of this off-ball linebacker market that some people thought was going to explode. They thought a lot of these guys are going to get 15 million and they're going to, really climb the charts in terms of the way that this position has changed a little bit. But they get Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean, and I think they didn't. I think they thought those numbers were going to be higher on both of them. And the spine of your defense, the middle of your defense now is dramatically improved. And if you don't have a good middle, it's usually just spells really, really bad for your defense. So now you get two guys in the middle of the field that are really good. I know a lot about Nakobe Dean from my time spent with the Philadelphia Eagles. There were things that they did last year defensively that they felt like they couldn't have done if Nakobe Dean wasn't the one that was running things or the one that's in the middle of the field there. They did things very specifically because of Nakobe Dean. Like these things don't function without him. He's a great leader. He's a great middle of the defense type of athlete, and he came back from that massive injury playing even better. I think they took advantage of some things. I really do think the Raiders actually had a pretty good offseason so far in the early portion of free agency. I think moderate risk with Kwity Paye and Eric Stokes for sure. And so I just think this is a better team than they were. Let's get to Ayuk to the Raiders. It's somebody whoever goes after Brandon Ayuk is going to have to do some serious work. Because how south things went in San Francisco, those teams are going to want to be aware of what happened, what type of player you're getting on and off the field, and some questions certainly do need to be answered. Ravens, please, we need a receiver. I can see the Ravens certainly getting that other receiver in the draft. I really can. There's going to be a number of them. They have their picks back, their first round pick back. They could go receiver in the first round if they wanted to. I think they can get a really good receiver in the second round as well. Interior offensive line is definitely a need for them, I think, as well. Any shot, Maxx to Detroit? There's certainly a lot of talk about that, huh? Maxx to Detroit. Oh, here we are. This does obviously, this is what we're talking about. 49ers plan to release Brandon Ayuk, and it can happen as early as today. It should happen today. They've been planning it for a few months now. It's not earth-shattering by any stretch as the 49ers now move with Mike Evans and Ricky Pearsall kind of running the group there. I don't think Juwan Jennings is headed back either, so it could be a little bit different situation in what's going on there in San Francisco. A lot of Maxx to Detroit. Obviously, Detroit's been looking for a running mate opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. And I've said that on here a lot, and I think the Lions have said that a lot. It's just a lot of funds to allocate. You got a lot of other deals you're trying to work there in Detroit right now. Number one overall, don't have time to develop their starting. Yeah, there's two schools of thought on that. I want to just say this real quick. There's two schools of thought on that. There's people that I do a show with Chase Daniel. Chase insists that you need to play right away. You learn from live bullets and you learn from going out there and doing it. And I agree with that. And then there's other schools of thought, like the Kubiak family essentially thinks, is you don't play a guy before he's ready because you could set him back mentally far enough to where he may never come back. I get that too, and I like it. Neither sense of thinking is wrong. I do think it depends on the player. And I'm curious if Clint Kubiak will have this same thinking that he really has had in the past and learned from his dad with Fernando Mendoza. Because the two biggest traits of Fernando Mendoza are his mental toughness and his physical toughness. If both of those are through the roof, like everybody has told me, I don't know how he's impacted by getting hit a bunch early. Is he? I mean, I know the NFL is different than college, but that's the one thing you're worried about with playing a guy early is that he starts seeing ghosts, he gets hit a bunch, his development doesn't exactly happen the way you want it to happen, and you're off to a terrible start. You saw that happen with Drake May. New England didn't play him right out of the gate. A lot of people argue that they should have. It's just one of the more debated topics for sure. I don't think you should be living in either school. I think you should move it to some extent depending on the player. And I think the toughness of Fernando Mendoza actually plays a big factor in that. It also depends on the line. You don't throw a rock out there with a bad line, a rook out there, sorry, with a bad line. He won't succeed. That's the other part. When you're drafted at the top of the draft, what are you usually getting drafted to? Not a very good team, right? You usually get drafted to not a very good team. But there's a million exceptions and different type of scenarios that happen. Patrick Mahomes sat for his entire first season. And if you ask him, he said nothing better could have ever helped his career. He doesn't think he'd be the player he would be today if he didn't sit his entire first year and watch Alex Smith. So there's always a different way you can think about it, but oftentimes you're right behind a bad line right when you get out there. I mean, Cam Ward was running for his life this past season, and we'll see if that affected him. You also learn to create and do a lot of different things while you're out there running for your life. What else do we have here? How's done the Commanders yet? He has done the Commanders. Oh yeah, we talked Commanders. We can talk them a little more if you like, but I got to get to the Colts for sure because we only got like 8 minutes left. Let's go through the Colts real quick, and I'll get to some Commander stuff. The Alec Pierce deal. They're really paying Alec Pierce to for what's to come, not for what has happened. This massive contract, the biggest free agent contract in receiver history in the NFL, is because of what they think Alec Pierce is going to be able to do. He started sliding into that one spot, good chemistry with Daniel Jones. They knew with the money they were going to give him that Michael Pittman was expendable, and Michael Pittman's number was very big. It was either going to need to be restructured or he was going to need to be cut. They ended up trading him and for a late pick swap, essentially, and then the Steelers give him that new deal. What Pittman does for this offense essentially could be replaced, to my understanding, with the way Tyler Warren works, with the way Josh Dobbs works, and Downs works, and they have the opportunity to kind of fill in some of that underneath stuff, while the deep threat and the explosiveness that comes from Alec Pierce will still be used, but they need him to develop more of an intermediate game, which they think he has started to really grow the last couple of years. Reggie Wayne, working with him, has done wonders with what he's done, but he's obviously going to need more than 47 catches, which is the most he's ever had in a season. 32 of them were explosive catches, but he needs to start working to be more of a number one receiver, and they're banking on that. That's a little bit of a risk. They're banking on Daniel Jones to have continued success. A little bit of a risk. And then I mentioned how they were in on Trey Hendrickson, but the contracts of the other two kind of slowed them down, and it got them out of the Trey Hendrickson essentially sweepstakes. They still do need to look at edge rushers for sure. Latu is really their only one out of the four they have that is any worth his salt right now. And so getting out there and getting some edge rushing help is still probably pretty high on the Indianapolis Colts' list, but they did get their top two priorities done, which was Alec Pierce and Daniel Jones. I mentioned that we talked about the Commanders quite a bit. I think Nick Ross is a really good pickup. I think you got a really dynamic tight end that can help out with Jaden Daniels for sure. I know they're still looking at another receiver. Again, you can get these guys in the draft as well. So I know that Adam Peters doesn't want to be overly aggressive, but he's been in on a lot. The Commander's name keeps coming up with like the vast majority of these deals. They just haven't landed a ton of players, but they've been in on them. It's just at what price? I guess they're honestly looking at where they're at. Max and the Colts. I got any Broncos news? We kind of touched that a little bit. Looks like Philly may be interested in Grenard. They definitely need to pivot. Let's go to Philly really quickly. They need to pivot after losing Jalen Phillips. That was who they thought they were going to bring back. They gave up the third-round pick at the deadline, not just to push them towards a Super Bowl and try to repeat, but they knew keeping him in Vic Fangio's system, something he's familiar with, and they knew he'd really like Philly, that he'd want to stay. And they thought he was going to stay, honestly. They thought that was going to be a deal that they were going to get done. The Panthers come in and swoop in and give a monster deal. Now, I think I do want to say Jackson Hunt, Jalix Hunt, I always say his name wrong. They do believe he's developing into a really good edge rusher. I mean, it's a guy that was a former safety that they do think is becoming better and better on the edge. They still have Nolan Smith as well. Could Brandon Graham come back for another year? It's not fully ruled out, I don't think. But they're still looking at edges. And I think they were looking at Hendrickson for sure. They were one of those teams that was in that. And they're definitely looking at Jonathan Grenard. They're weighing their options at edge right now. I know Howie's trying to keep track of all of these different things, but that's a position where they know they need to get better. The Bills, I just wanted to mention, I think this Bradley Chubb move is a really good move. I think the DJ Moore move is an outstanding move. I really do. I think he's going to flourish in that offense. He's not a true dominant X wide receiver, but his yards after the catch are great. His fit with Joe Brady is outstanding. He had 2,000-yard seasons with Joe in Carolina, so he understands how to use the player. There was not a very good fit that was going on between him and Caleb Williams in Chicago. I think this change of scenery is going to be outstanding. I don't think he's a really good locker room guy. He's a captain. I think he's going to make this group better and keep an eye on Khalil Shakir's role continue to expand even further. But the other move that they made that I think is outstanding is the Connor McGovern move, that they locked him up for 4 years and $52 million prior to the start of the new league year opening and the tampering window opening. I think after Tyler Linderbaum, it was essentially probably Connor McGovern. And I know that Josh Allen really positioned himself difficult. My dog's going crazy over here right now. Josh Allen really pushed hard for Connor McGovern to be brought back. He is brought back. And I think everything that he does from a mental standpoint up front, I think this was a really good move from Brandon Beane. I think they've had a decent showing so far. Still needs safety help. Still needs some help on defense as you're changing a Jim Leonard scheme. But they've done some really good things. What else do we got? What else do we got? Need a first or a second or a third for Gennard. Gennard is not a free agent. I don't think they've really been lowering their price. I think that's the part that Howie's always waiting on. He's always trying to make sure he can win a deal. If you talk to other general managers, they'll always tell you Howie feels like he has to win the deal. And so we'll see what he can finagle over the next couple of days and hours, and we'll see. Any Chiefs signings? We mentioned Chiefs. We went over kind of them and what's going on with the Chiefs, but. They got that draft capital back for sure. The Kenneth Walker move was massive for them. Max opposite TJ Watt would be sick. Yeah, it would. I love it. Everybody loves Max, right? Everybody absolutely loves Max. There was a guy in Baltimore that shaved his head. He said, I'll shave my head if we get Maxx Crosby. Well, he had shaved his head, and now I'm not sure what he's doing next, that Maxx Crosby's no longer a member of the Baltimore Ravens. Let's go to Bears. We're almost done here. They wanted to be aggressive, but also they really had a lot of cap constraints with the way this roster is put together. They wanted to get some pass rushing help. They obviously needed a weak side linebacker, safety, a left tackle. They end up just making that Jedrick Wills move, which is a good move to add to your offensive line. They made the trade for Garrett Bradbury after Drew Dalman retired. I think that is a really important move because Dalman was a huge part of the growth for Caleb Williams in year 2. You can't understate what he did for him at the line of scrimmage. Garrett Bradbury is a very smart center. I like the Kobe Bryant move in the back end. Why? Because he makes plays. Same thing with Devin Bush. Like, these guys are Chicago Bears. They led the NFL in forcing turnovers a season ago. They had 33 as a defense. I think they were plus 22 in the turnover differential. These guys make plays. Devin Bush makes plays. So you knew they needed to make a change at linebacker. They kind of make a play there. With Kobe Bryant coming in, I did think there was a chance that the price could be right, that they bring back Kevin Byard. They end up not doing it. For 1 year, $9 million in New England. I'm curious how close Chicago was to trying to keep him. But they might have known that they had to make a move here at tackle to make sure that they could do that and weren't able to do entirely what they wanted to do on the back end. But linebacker, I think Devin Bush he gets 3 for 30. And he's a guy that just makes a ton of plays in the middle of your defense, and that's what Dennis Allen is honestly looking for. I know pass rush is still something that they want. I think they were certainly in on Maxx Crosby. They were one of the teams, if you asked for a handful of them that were brought up regularly, to me, they were one of them. I'm not sure how close to the asking price, though, that Ryan Poles really ever got. So I just see right here, all smiles for Jordan Davis. I'll say this because I saw some Philly people on here for sure. If the Vikings get a second for Gennard, do you see the Vikings moving up at all to get running back Love? Love is going to be, I think, before pick 8. He might be in the top 5. He is going to be up there for sure. That's going to be very, very interesting. Would Brandon Ayuk at wide receiver 2 help Jaden? I think we're talking about Jaden Daniels there. But here's the thing. He's a really good route runner. He's a really good receiver. Everything went sideways in San Francisco. Can a change of scenery change it? Certainly. But teams need to do their work on Brandon Ayuk right now because of the talent's there, the route running is there, but there's definitely some other things that you need to go through. I'll just close with this kind of because I see the signing here. Jordan Davis gets his big contract in Philadelphia. Look for the Eagles to also, as people think Howie's been kind of quiet composed to other years, he's also trying to work out a deal with Jalen Carter. And you also know that I know the Eagles want added help at the edge rushing positions. if you're that good on the interior, like they are with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, it makes life a little bit easier on your edge guys for sure. But I do know that trying to get a deal done with Jalen Carter too is definitely a priority there in Philadelphia. So everybody, appreciate you sticking with us for the whole hour here. And we are now into the league year of 2026. Javon Hargraves is going. To Green Bay. Actually, he's going to Green Bay up front. Obviously, they made that trade with the Colts that lightened things up at the defensive tackle spot a little bit for them, and we knew that they were going to need to replenish that defensive tackle spot. But if anybody wants to dip, I'm going to leave because Eric DeCosta is now talking, the Ravens general manager. And if you want to know anything that's going on with Maxx Crosby, I would tune in to try to watch this right now, like I'm going to. So let me just say this real quickly. Eric DeCosta said that bringing Crosby in, they were unable to complete the process of the trade. Didn't bring up medicals. Interesting. Just said he's a steward of the organization as he has to act with organization's best interests in mind. Interesting. If we're going to dodge medical questions throughout this, it's going to be fascinating to see what's happening. But Eric DeCosta did say that they really, really wanted Maxx Crosby on their team. Well, they don't. I'm done. Go watch Eric DeCosta. I'm going to do it. Everybody, take it easy.